Hey y'all, this is Miss Smith, and I am recording week four's work while we are all at home during the social distancing period. I am going to pull up what this week's module should look like. Well, that was my email, sorry. Distance Learning Week 4. Your module should look like this. Now, you won't have any videos yet, obviously, because I'm making the video right now. But afterwards, this video will be on there, or if I decide to stop and make several short videos, I will. But the first thing I want you to do is to take my survey, open it in a new window, and then it's going to say, would you rather have one long video or several short videos? Please answer this question so that I can decide what to do for the next few weeks where we are at home. I'm assuming that we're going to be at home. Okay. Then let's go back to the module. And whichever one gets the most votes on the survey will be what I do. I'm also going to send that out on Remind too. Okay, the week 4 choice board. Download that. I would download that if I were you, just so it's easier to see and refer back to. Okay, so Wordly Wise, actually let's start here. 7th grade ELA, week 4 distance learning this week. I am recording this on Sunday night, if you can't tell, Easter, because I forgot that this Sunday is Easter, and I usually do my videos on Sundays. I have what I call right now quarantine brain, where you pretty much forget everything in life. So I would have done this ahead of time if I had remembered, oh my goodness, I usually do this on Sundays, but Sunday is Easter. Anyways, I'm sure a lot of y'all have quarantine brain right now and forget what day of the week it is. So tomorrow is Monday, and this video will show up before Monday, hopefully. Complete everything above this line, and below this line, pick one to complete after you complete everything above. Now, I have changed the choice board from what you got in a packet, if you happen to have a packet. The only thing that's different really is that the packet gives you a thing over here and over here about Common Lit. Just don't worry about that, okay? I'm not going to give you anything extra. We're just going to use the independent practice, okay? Also, I just realized that I have a mistake. This says GimKit, but it's actually supposed to be Quizzes, because if you look on Canvas, I'll give you 2 Quizzes links, and we'll come back to that, okay? So if you have internet, go ahead and do the 2 Quizzes. Quizzes, you know what I mean. But so don't worry about the GimKit. There's not a GimKit because that doesn't really work for us right now. Just do these 2 quizzes. All right, so your survey choice board, and then lesson 16 bell work. Download that so that you can use it during your practice on the quizzes. Okay, so here's the PDF. This is what you'll look at. Obviously, you don't have to answer all these questions or anything unless you just want to, because you have nothing else to do, but I'm sure you have other things to do. So this is just so that you can have these definitions, okay? And then here we go. Okay, so there's your first quizzes link, and there's your second quizzes link. Do those, one on Monday, one on Wednesday. If you want to do them both on Monday, I don't really care. If you want to send me a screenshot afterwards, that's fine, but you don't have to. And then let's go back to this. So you can only do this if you have internet. If you don't worry about it. It's also just practice. Okay, iReady reading. Everybody's got to do this, whether you have it in a book or a packet or online on Canvas. So this week's lesson is called Comparing and Contrasting Genres. Let's take a look at that real quick before I go all the way through it. We're going to go ahead and download it because that's what works best. If I were you, I would file, save, and change it to lesson 19 and then your name. So my name would be Abby Smith, and save it to your desktop. Okay. and then you can edit it, save it, and send it to me. Now, some people are having problems where they try to save it and it doesn't save all their stuff. So just try your best. If you have to screenshot it, that's fine. I'll save your screenshots. And if for some reason you do all this, you save it, you think you sent it to me, you delete it, and then none of it's there, it's not the end of the world, I promise, okay? I'm not going to count that against you. All right, let's go back and let's go to our choice board. Okay, so we'll go over those pages, and then the independent practice. If you've got a book or a packet, pages 216 through 218, I think it actually may be a few more pages. Let's check that out. I'm gonna throw this away since we're not looking at it anymore. It is actually 215 through 218. So if you're doing it on paper, it'll look like this. If you're doing it on a PDF, you're actually not doing it on a PDF, you can click this lesson 19 independent practice quiz, and it will look like this. Okay, you've got question 1 and then you've got question 2. The difference is that on the PDF, you will have a question 2 part A and part B. Well, I had to make that question 2 and question 3. And then you have your question 4 essay question. But if you look at this, I don't expect you to write a whole lot because look at how much space they give you right there. Just give me about 3 to 5 sentences, however many you need, okay? And you'll just send it in there. Okie doke? All right, let's go back to the home page. I'm going to minimize that, and we're going to look at our choice board one more time. Okay, so you need to finish everything above here. Unless you don't have internet access, then you don't do this Wordly Wise. Okay, and then below this line, you're going to pick one to complete after you do all these. If you want to do it before and then come back and finish these, that's fine. All schedules are pretty much out the window during this season. Okay, so you can either do 2 iReady lessons for this week, reading. You can do either ones that I have assigned in the past that you haven't done already, or you can do the ones where you just get to pick. I can't remember what they're called right now. Or if you don't want to do iReady reading, you can create a PowerPoint or a type of media of your choice. I think a PowerPoint would be easiest, but if you wanted to create a little video, some of y'all have been sending me videos of your PDFs every week. That would be fine. Just compare and contrast the 2 stories in the independent practice, this right here, it's actually pages 215 through 218, and submit it through a Canvas message. So send me a Canvas message with that. If you have trouble figuring out how to attach that or anything, just let me know. Now, if you do not have internet, you obviously can't do this one. So just do this in writing, or do it in a PowerPoint or something, and maybe you can send it to me one day, okay? Or if you need to make a video on your phone and send it to me through Remind, that's fine too. Alrighty, we're gonna get out of this, and we're gonna start looking at lesson 19. Gonna exit out of that for now, and that. All right. Lesson 19, comparing and contrasting genres. I'm going to go through this first page with you, and then I might cut it off before the next video. Actually, you know what? I will try to make one long video for this week because I have to upload everything for all of your classes individually. So if I make 5 videos, then I have to upload that 5 times the 6 classes I have, and that's 30 things I have to upload. So I'm going to try to make one long video for this week. Okie dokie, comparing and contrasting genres. We are on lesson 19. If you look through your book, we have covered pretty much every lesson in my class, which is absolutely awesome. And then the stuff that I've planned after this week is going through some more in-depth stuff, but they're a little bit shorter. All right, so let's look at the standard for this. It's compare and contrast a fictional portrayal of a time, place, or character and a historical account of the same period as a means of understanding how authors of fiction use or alter history. So basically, we're going to be looking at nonfiction and fiction. Okay? All right, and the theme is a time of transition. Sorry. All right, so let's read this together. As you go through this, I would highlight or underline the definitions like we normally do in class with a pen or pencil or a highlighter. But you can do this with the little thing up here. Have you ever seen a movie about an important part of history, such as the civil rights movement, that included fictional characters? Okay, I'm going to stop right here. If you've seen any war movie that's about a real war that happened, then you've seen something like this, okay? They're all a little bit fictional because they're not real unless they're documentary. All right, this kind of movie is a work of historical fiction or a story set in the past that combines made-up characters and events with historical figures and real events from a specific time and place. Okie dokie. Okay, come on. All right, we're going to highlight that. So you're going to need to know what historical fiction is. A historical account, on the other hand, is a factual explanation, description, or narrative from or about the past. And we'll go ahead and highlight the rest of this too. All the people actually lived, the places existed, and the events in the historical account really occurred. So historical fiction is historical fiction, and historical account would be nonfiction, okay? So it's real. So fiction means fake, nonfiction means not fake, so real. All right, study the illustration below, which details are based on reality and which are fictional. Now, you don't really know this because it's not really clear what we're looking at, but if you look at the description, it'll tell you. The image above shows a real person, Martin Luther King Jr., which I'm sure you've all heard of, standing next to a fictional character, a young woman who admires him. In a similar way, historical fiction includes real people and events and then alters some historical details to tell a made-up story. All right, so historical fiction uses a little elaboration. Okay, study the chart below to consider how the author of historical fiction draws upon real facts to create a work of fiction. Okay, how historical fiction uses history. So if we are looking at a story, an article, anything about something, someone, someplace in history, but it's not all true necessarily, then it's going to be set in a real time period and place. It provides factual information. It includes events that actually occurred. It uses historical figures, language, and details, such as famous people or typical customs of the times. Okay, so we're going to use the Civil War for just a second. So if we were watching a movie about the Civil War or we were reading a book about the Civil War, and it's not nonfiction, so it's fiction, it's historical fiction. Part of it is fake, but there are some real things in it. It's going to have the real time period, the years of the Civil War, and the places where it took place. Okay, so the states that it would have taken place in, and maybe it might even go down to local areas such as a place like Corinth or Shiloh. Okay, it's going to provide factual information. So this could be numbers, this could be time periods, this could be people's names. It's going to include events that actually occurred, so it may talk about, like the Battle of Shiloh, the Battle of Corinth, things like that. And it's going to talk about famous people. So it's going to use some of the war generals and things like that, and then typical customs of the times. People weren't going to have iPhones and things like that. It's going to talk more about letters and paper and people riding horses and shooting cannons and things like that. Okay, how historical fiction alters history. The plot or the storyline combines real and made up events. So it might talk about the Battle of Corinth, but it might talk about something that was made up during that time. Okay, so something that somebody did during this time period, but it wasn't real. Made up yet realistic characters interact with real people who once lived. So I might write myself in this story and say, Abby Smith lived during the Civil War, and I interacted with a soldier named blah, 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 da, 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 da. Okay. So I obviously wasn't during that time period, but I could make myself sound realistic, and say that I interacted with so and so who was in the war, but I didn't because I wasn't alive then. Okay, most dialogue is invented. So the dialogue is the speaking between two or more characters. It can also be one character. That might be more of a monologue. So that is made up, and it doesn't use real quotes from history. It's going to use made up talking back and forth. All right, may interpret or change historical details to create a better story. So I might talk about a battle that was lost and say it was actually won, or even though we lost it, we still had a really good whatever. Okay. All right, let's move on to page 210. At any point in this, you are allowed to pause or take a break. I'm going to go up here and see if we're still recording. Yes, we are. I wish this kept time for me, but it doesn't, as far as I know. Okay, so we're on the modeled instruction now. We're going to read this historical account about the Lewis and Clark expedition. This is a historical account, so that means this really happened, and this isn't going to use a lot of opinions or any made-up characters or made-up speaking or anything like that. It's just going to be a bunch of facts. All right, Journey to the Pacific, sorry, by Rita Hay. In 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark led the first U.S. expedition to the Pacific coast of North America, sent by President Thomas Jefferson to chart a route through unexplored regions of the country. The team of explorers recorded the wide variety of plants, animals, and geography they saw in the wilderness. The expedition journeyed among rivers, over mountains, and through valleys for over a year, encountering hostile tribes, inclement weather, and challenging terrain. On November 7th, 1805, the Corps of Discovery thought they had finally found the Pacific Ocean, but they were mistaken. The wide expanse of, sorry, I lost my place, of open water turned out to be the estuary or mouth of the Columbia River. With the help of native guides and determined companions, however, the team finally succeeded. The expedition reached the Pacific Ocean on November 15, 1805. A long, hard winter and return journey lay before them, but the first half of their mission had been accomplished. Okay, what characteristics of a historical account are present in this passage? This historical account of Lewis and Clark's expedition includes many details about their journey. Underline the examples of facts, people, and places that present historical information. Okie doke. So if we look in the very first line, we will see this right here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that you can stop and try this on your own if you want. Pause it and then press play to find out the answers, or you can go ahead and just go along with this since this is the first time you've done this in this class. Okay, in 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark led the first U.S. expedition to the Pacific coast of North America. We've got a year, we've got two people, what they did, where they went, all right? Very factual. Facts, people, places. All right, they were sent by President Thomas Jefferson to chart a route through unexplored regions of the country. Okay, so that's what happened. It is a fact. That is the person who sent them. That is a fact. Okay, the explorers recorded the wide varieties of plants, animals, and geography. All right, so they were checking out the nation for Thomas Jefferson, for the land. That is what they did. It is a fact. Now we see more numbers. On November 7th, 1805, the Corps of Discovery thought they had finally found the Pacific Ocean, but they were mistaken. So we've got a date, and we've got a name of their group. And then what happened, they thought they found the Pacific Ocean, but they were mistaken. And then they had actually found the mouth of the Columbia River. So that's also what really happened. And then the expedition reached the Pacific Ocean on November 15th, 1805. All right, we've got another number right there. Anywhere you've got numbers, you've usually got a fact. All right, so they finally reached their destination that they wanted to on November 15th, 1805. All right, so we're going to record these historical facts in this box right here, and then after we read the next page, we'll record fictional details, okay? Because the next page is going to give us a historical fiction, fake, remember, version of this expedition right here that was described. Okay, so our historical facts, we are going to begin with this very first thing. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark began the expedition of the Pacific coast in 1804. So if you want to take what I just wrote right there, shorter, and write it down here, you can, or you can draw arrows. I'm fine with that too. And then Thomas Jefferson asked them to make this journey, and the expedition was called the Corps of Discovery. So if you want to write that down, what I wrote or what I just read is shorter, or you can draw arrows. And then they mistook sorry, I lost my spot. The estuary of the Columbia River for the Pacific Ocean on November 7th, 1805, but they actually found the Pacific on November 15th, 1805. All right, so you can draw your arrows or write that down. And then the fictional details we're going to find right here. All right, so this is a historical fiction version, a fake version of that we just read, and it's called Sighting the Pacific by J.C. Wright. Let's go ahead and read this real quick. Actually, we're going to read this and then do the close reading. As the weary explorers reached the top of the hill, Mr. Lewis let out a cry of delight. "We've made it," he exclaimed, "the Pacific." The men exchanged doubtful glances. Just last week, Mr. Clark had rejoiced along with the entire team, confident that the large body of water before them was the ocean. Later, they discovered that the water was just the estuary of the Columbia River. Yet they smelled ocean air. Peter had tried to stay positive as they continued their search, but it was extremely difficult. Would today, November 15th, actually be the day they reached the Pacific Ocean? "That certainly is a sight for sore eyes," one of the men exclaimed, and Peter looked up and grinned. After a year and a half of traveling, they had, in fact, come upon the salt waters of the Pacific. All right, this close reading. Which facts from the account on the previous page are present in this historical fiction story? Underline facts that are the same or similar. So the things that we underlined in red were facts, historical facts, and we wrote them right here, drew our arrows down, and we're going to see if any of those are in this. All right, so we do have some. We've got some of our people that are the same. Mr. Lewis or Meriwether Lewis, and then we got William Clark, Mr. Clark. We can tell that this is fiction because they usually would have used their first and last name if this was nonfiction. All right, they discovered water that was just the estuary of the Columbia River. So they made a mistake thinking it was the Pacific Ocean. And then we got a number right here, the 15th, November 15th, or a date. Actually the day that they reached the Pacific Ocean. And then they had, in fact, come upon the salt waters of the Pacific. So they did eventually reach the Pacific. Okay, next it wants us to star any story elements that are clearly fictional and add them to the chart on the previous page. Okay, so dialogue a lot of times is one of the things that will be in historical fiction. Actually, let's go back up here and look real quick. Real and made up events, realistic characters, but they're made up. Dialogue, most dialogue is invented, and then they might change some historical details. Okay, so this dialogue, "We've made it," he exclaimed, "the Pacific." I can't star. Actually, I probably can, but I'm not sure how, so I'm going to highlight because we usually think of stars as yellow. All right, The men exchanged doubtful glances. We don't really know how they actually looked at each other. It doesn't say that in this historical account. We also don't really know what they said. And then they smelled ocean air. We don't know what they smelled. And then they tried to stay positive. We don't know, or Peter tried to stay positive. Peter is also made up because we don't know about anybody named Peter. And we don't know what he would have thought. And then we got some more dialogue. And then Peter looked up and grinned. We don't know what Peter would have done because we don't know that Peter existed. All right, so then you can write those things up here. You can draw arrows. I'll say them for you very short and quick. Peter's thoughts and feelings. The words spoken by Lewis and the men, and then the men's doubtful glances. We don't know what the men looked at each other like. All right, let's go ahead and do this multiple choice. Circle the best answer. Which fact presented in Journey to the Pacific is also included in the fictional story above? So Journey to the Pacific was this, and it was full of facts. Which one was also in this? Okay, and we just underlined the facts that were also in this. Okay, so it's going to be one of these that's underlined probably. Compare the answer choices with the facts you underlined in Journey to the Pacific. That's actually what I just said. Okay, let's look at these answer choices. Peter played a key role as a member of Lewis and Clark's team. Do we know that Peter was there? No. Some of the explorers felt that the ocean was a sight for sore eyes. Do we know in this one what the explorers felt? No. Peter tried to keep his spirits up during the expedition. Once again, we don't know that Peter existed, so no. The explorers had mistaken an estuary for the Pacific Ocean. Is that something that we underlined? Yes. Right here. They discovered that the water was just the estuary of the Columbia River, and we also have that right here. Okay, so our answer is D. Describe how the author of Sighting the Pacific, so this one right here, used and altered historical facts about the Lewis and Clark expedition to tell a story. So he used the dates, November 15th, or one date. He used the names, so Lewis and Clark. He told about what happened, so they thought they reached the Pacific, but it was just the estuary of the Columbia River, and then they actually did reach the Pacific, so he did use some facts. But he altered some things to tell a story. He created a character named Peter. Here we have Peter. And we see some of Peter's thoughts. And we see some made up dialogue and also some of the other people's thoughts. So if you can just sum that up in like one or two sentences and write that there, perfect. All right, we are going to move on to the guided practice. If you want to stop and take a break, now will be the time to press pause and then come back later. But I'm going to go on right ahead. This is a historical account, which means it is nonfiction. It actually happened, okay? Orphan Train Riders by Elliot Elmore. All right, let's look at the study buddy real quick. I know I don't look at these guys a whole lot, but we're going to look at it today. Because this is a historical account, I know that it contains true facts and historically accurate details. As I read, I'm going to focus on the historical events and people that are mentioned in the text. So I want you to pay attention to numbers. Anytime you see numbers, whether it's a date or just a number of something, anytime you see proper nouns like the name of a place, the name of people, the name of organizations, those are important. And just look out for those mostly, okay? All right, I'm going to read this. If you don't want to listen to me read, you can fast forward a little bit through this. Okay, by the mid-1800s, the New York City streets were filled with an estimated 30,000 poor and hungry children. Many were homeless or abandoned. They sold newspapers, rags, or matches in order to earn money and lived on the streets in all kinds of weather, often forming gangs in order to protect themselves. The children led hard lives, but it was the only life they knew. In 1853, Charles Loring Brace, a young minister, took it upon himself to help these children. When a child stands in front of you in rags with a tear-stained face, he said, you cannot easily forget him. Brace founded the Children's Aid Society, an organization devoted to moving children from the streets of New York City to new homes in rural areas across the country. Later referred to as the Orphan Train Movement, the first step in the process was to load needy children onto what became known as orphan trains. The children were then transported to 47 states and Canada. Brace believed that loving families in rural areas would adopt these children. He hoped they would grow up with the education and support needed to become productive members of society. Handbills advertised the arrival of the orphan train in town. The orphans were cleaned up and displayed on stage in front of curious crowds. Potential parents poked and inspected the children like livestock. Siblings were often split apart. Some children ran away and some were abused. Others found supportive people whom they considered family for the rest of their lives. Regardless of the outcome, however, most found the experience and transition to a new life to be difficult at best. Yet overall, the program resulted in positive outcomes. 2 orphans even grew up to be not senators, governors. The mass relocation of needy children across the country was Brace's best effort to connect them with better lives. The orphan train movement was later considered to be the beginning of the foster care system. Alrighty, I thought that this was really interesting, for one, because I had never heard of it. It, to me, is an interesting story that really happened. All right, so let's look at the close reading. Circle at least 3 details that help identify this passage as a historical account. So in the very beginning, we've got some numbers. By the mid-1800s, the New York City streets were filled with an estimated 30,000 poor and hungry children. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop and say, if you want to pause and try to do these close readings, and the next article and the close readings and all this by yourself, that's fine, or you can listen along with me like we might do in class. Okay, I can't circle, so I'm going to highlight. Actually, I can, but y'all know I struggle. So by the mid-1800s, the New York streets were filled with an estimated 30,000 poor and hungry children. I'm going to use pink because why not? Okay, another fact or a thing that would identify this as a historical account, so it really happened in history, was this year, 1853. Remember, numbers are usually important. Brace, so Charles Loring Brace, we're going to go ahead and highlight his name. And we have a proper noun right here, Children's Aid Society, and it tells us what it is, an organization devoted to moving children from the streets of, another proper noun, New York City to new homes in rural areas across the country. And that was a fact that happened, and this helps us realize that it is a historical account. All right, and then paragraph 3, it tells us about the orphan train movement. So we've got a proper noun right here, words with capital letters, and it explains to us what this is. So later referred to as the orphan train movement, the first step in the process was to load needy children, sorry, I lost my place, onto what became known as orphan trains. The children were then transported to 47 states and Canada, another proper noun. So this tells us where they go, or where they went, past tense. All right, we're going to skip paragraph 4, and we're going to move down to paragraph 5. The orphan train movement, we got that proper noun again, was later considered to be the beginning of the foster care system. Alrighty, let's look at this close reading right here. Underline the most important facts that the author presents about the orphan train movement. Look for details that answer who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay, so we're going to look at things that show some facts. And we've already got some of those. Okay. In the beginning, we got this whole thing where that's a fact, okay? So we're going to go ahead and underline that. I know that red underline is hard to see with the pink, so I've learned my mistake and I won't do that again. All right. Brace founded the Children's Aid Society. So this was something that happened. That was a fact. It was called the Orphan Train Movement. And we're going to go ahead and underline the rest of this because that is what happened on the Orphan Train Movement. And then something else, some other facts. Orphans were cleaned up and displayed on stage. This unfortunately reminds me a lot of slavery times. And then some things that happened to the children. Some children ran away and some were abused. Others found supportive people that they considered family for the rest of their lives. Most found the experience and transition to be difficult at best, which is really sad. But the lives they lived already seem sad too, so I'm not sure which would be better. All right, and the program resulted in positive outcomes. Not completely, because we do know that it was difficult, but generally positive outcomes is what this says. I don't know how they measured it. Some people might consider that an opinion. Okay, we're going to go on to the next part of the guided practice. If you need to take a break or press pause, that's fine. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and get on into it. The genre is historical fiction. So this is a fake version of this right here. It's going to sound real because it's got some things that lend to an historical account, like places and people and time periods and numbers and facts and things like that. But there's going to be some that's made up, okay? The Train to Somewhere by Lydia Wren. Now, as you read, I want you to think about how this child's experience is similar to and different from this story right here. Okay, so what is this child experience that's the same, and then what do they experience that's different? All right, my heart was in my throat as Robbie and I boarded the train in New York City that April day. A member of the Children's Aid Society led us to our seats and advised, be sure to smile and make a good impression on the people you meet. At age 5, I thought myself lucky. At least I had my older brother at my side. I could still remember Mama humming as she cooked dinner and my father's smiling face, but they had both died. For months, we had lived on the streets until the Children's Aid Society sheltered us. Now they were shipping us on an orphan train to a new home and a new life. As the train gathered speed, I caught one last glimpse of the city, the only home I had ever known. The next few days blurred together as our train powered over rivers, lush farmlands, and empty prairies. Where were we going and what would happen to us? Our destination and future were unclear and unknown. Then one morning we pulled into a small station as our society escorts did their best to smooth our hair and straighten our clothes. Weary and confused, we were led to a large hall and seated on a stage in front of a crowd of strangers. Many stared, but some walked up to inspect us. Suddenly, I was staggered by a terrible thought. What if Robbie and I went to different homes in different towns and were separated permanently? What do you know about farming? A man asked Robbie gruffly. Wide-eyed, Robbie stammered a response, and my heart thumped wildly in my chest as I clutched his sweaty hand. Now, Jacob, said a plain woman behind the man, don't start off by scaring them. She looked at us and smiled. Are you brother and sister? Would you like to come live with us? Some 70 years later, I still remark at how well my luck held. It wasn't just that Robbie and I were raised together or that our lives were all pleasure and no pain. No, it was that the Larsons came to take us home that day. Two caring people who became our new family and who made us who we are today. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second to make sure All right, as far as I know, my volume is still going. My fear is that we'll have recorded this thing and there will be no voice. Okay, close reading. Compare the dates, people, places, and events described in the previous passage to those described in this story. Underline any facts that are similar. All right, we're going to do that real quick. Let's look at paragraph 2. Okay, if you want to try to do this on your own, again, you can go ahead and do this. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and just start. We had lived on the streets until the Children's Aid Society sheltered us. So we know that children were living on the streets based on the last article, and that the Children's Aid Society helped shelter them. And that society also shipped them to an orphan train to help them find a new home and a new life. All right, we're going to skip down to paragraph 4. We were led to a large hall and seated on a stage in front of a crowd of strangers. Okay, so we know that the children were taken to these places where they were put on a stage in front of strangers to see if these strangers wanted to adopt them, basically. And then we're going to skip down to paragraph 7. 2 caring people who became our new family. So we do know that some of these children went home to caring families, but unfortunately, not all of them did. All right, we're going to look at the next close reading. Which details come from the author's imagination? So what did the author make up in addition to these facts to create a story, okay? Historical fiction. Draw a box around 3 story elements that show it is a work of fiction, okay? I'm going to go ahead and give you more than 3, but that's fine. And I'm going to highlight them in yellow. Okay, my heart was in my throat as Robbie and I boarded the train in New York City that April day. Okay, we don't know how these children felt necessarily. We don't have accounts from them based on that last historical account. So, and we don't have names of the children either based on this right here. Okay, so that is something that the author came up with their own imagination. They created 2 children named Robbie and I don't think we ever find out the other one's name. Brother and a sister, and this is going to be their experience. At age 5, I thought myself lucky. At least I had my older brother at my side. I still could remember Mama, my father, and they'd both died. So this author is creating a scenario that children might have been going through at the time. Paragraph 3, where were we going and what would happen to us? So this is the child's thoughts. We don't know what these children necessarily thought. Paragraph 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so we've got thoughts right here. Suddenly I was staggered by a terrible thought. What if Robbie and I went to different homes? That would be so scary. I hate this for this child / these children. And then we have dialogue and thoughts again in the last paragraph. So all of this is a personal account, but it's made up, okay? We don't have that information up here, so it's made up, okay? These are imaginary thoughts and conversations that really could have happened during these times. If you read this, it sounds like something that could have happened to these same children, but we don't know that it happened exactly this way, so it's made up. Okay, let's look at the guided practice, part 4. We're going to use the hints on this page to help us answer the questions. Let's first look at number 1. If you want to try these by yourself, pause and then press play once you're done. Okay, number 1, which detail from the historical account best supports the fictional story about a girl's orphan train experience? So let's look at the hint. Compare paragraph 4 of the historical account to the girl's experience in The Train to Somewhere, which was the fake account. What similarities and differences do you find? If we go back up to paragraph 4, let's read that real quick. Handbills advertise the arrival of the orphan train in town. The orphans were cleaned up and displayed on stage in front of curious crowds. Potential parents poked and inspected the children like livestock. Siblings were often split apart. Some of the children ran away and some were abused. Others found supportive people whom they considered family for the rest of their lives. Regardless of the outcome, however, most of the experience and transformation to a new life proved to be difficult at best. Most found this to be okay. I messed it up, but you can read it. Okie doke. So, based on what happened in there, to what happened to this fictional story of this little girl and her brother Robbie, um, let's look at this. Which detail from the historical account in paragraph 4 best supports the fictional story about the girl's orphan train experience? Handbills advertised the arrival of the orphan train in town. This one does not say anything about the handbills, so that's fine. The children were all adopted into caring families and new homes. We only have the scenario of 2 children who were actually sent to a good home, so we can't say that. The crowds gathered at the town stations to greet the orphans. Um, does it really sound like they greeted them in this? Where was that? Many stared, but some walked up to inspect us. That doesn't really sound like greeted, like, hey, welcome. And then the last one, the experience was quite upsetting for the orphan children. If you reread this child's thoughts, um, she was scared. She was really scared about what was happening. She had no idea what was going to happen. Our destination and future are unclear and unknown. What would happen to us? Where are we going? What if Robbie and I went to different homes? All of that. Okay. It was quite upsetting for the orphan children, and we do see that back in this. Some children ran away, some were abused, some found good homes, but at the best, most found the experience and transition to a new life to be difficult at best. So it was tough for them, and it was probably upsetting. So D. All right, number 2. Which statement best describes how the author of The Train to Somewhere alters historical details to tell her story? So how does this author alter historical details? Let's look at the hint. Reread the chart on the first page of this lesson. How does the author of the historical fiction piece alter history? The plot combines real and made-up events. Yes, this one does. Mine are made-up events. Made up yet realistic characters. They're made up children, but they very well could have been those homeless children in New York. The dialogue is made up, and then they don't really change historical details, but she does interpret them. Okay, so let's look at this. The author includes historical facts, such as when the Children's Aid Society was formed. Yes, but does that alter it? No. Okay, the author describes the experiences and feelings of an imaginary orphan who was sent west on an orphan train. Does that sound historical, but is it altered? Yes, let's come back to this one. All right, C, the author provides specific details about families who agreed with Brace's beliefs about ways to help needy orphan children. No, it talks a little bit about one family, but it doesn't even give specific details, so this answer is baloney. All right, D, the author explores the adventures of 2 young children as they start their lives on a farm in rural America. No, it doesn't even talk about their adventures as they start their new lives. It just talks about them being adopted, pretty much. So that answer is, once again, baloney. So let's go back to B. The author describes the experiences and feelings of an imaginary orphan who was sent west on an orphan train. Yes. This little girl, it tells about her feelings. It tells about what she went through. It wasn't real, but it sounds really real because it sounds a lot like what these children would have been through. Okay? So our answer choice is B. All right, number 3. Compare and contrast details in the historical account of the orphan train movement to those in the fictional story. Describe how the author of The Train to Somewhere, our fictional story, has used and altered historical facts. Use at least two details from the text to support your response. So we're going to look back at the facts we underlined in the fiction story that indicate which information both texts have in common. So these things that are underlined in red show what they have in common. They talk about the children living on the streets, the Children's Aid Society sheltering them, and shipping them on an orphan train to a new home and new life. They talk about the children being seated in front of a crowd of strangers, and they talk about sometimes a caring family would adopt them. So I'm going to give you a sample response of this because you haven't written one like this, all right? And actually, the independent practice won't need to be, the written answer won't need to be as long as this one. All right, so we are comparing fictional, the fake one, to the real one, historical account or nonfiction, not fake, okay? All right, I'm going to read this and explain it. The author used details from the actual experiences of orphans on the orphan trains, including that children were rescued by the Children's Aid Society off the streets of NYC and were sent away on trains to be taken in and adopted by strangers. The made-up details of the girls' experience illustrate the uncertainty and confusion expressed by those who actually lived it. The author altered details to describe the experiences of two imaginary children. She provided a happy ending to the story, which was not always the case in reality. All right, so our question said, compare and contrast details in the historical account of the orphan train movement to those in the fictional story. Describe how the author of The Train to Somewhere has used and altered historical facts. So the author used details from the actual experiences of orphans on the orphan trains by saying that they were rescued by the Children's Aid Society. That was something we had underlined, off the streets of NYC, the place where they were, and sent away on trains to be taken in and adopted by strangers. Those were facts that were in both stories, so in the fictional and the nonfiction. The made-up details of the girls' experiences, so this is where the author, altered historical facts, illustrate the uncertainty and confusion expressed by those who actually live it. So the little girl's account in The Train to Somewhere shows what those children might have felt like. So the author altered those details to describe the experiences of two imaginary children. So the little girl and her brother Robbie. And then she provided a happy ending to the story, which wasn't always the case. So she makes it sound all hunky-dory, but it was not always that way. So those were the things that she added. Okie doke. All right, you're gonna have to do something a little bit similar on your independent practice. And then if you choose to do the last thing on the choice board, if you need to stay and finish writing this, just pause the screen and then press play. I'm gonna get off here. And I'm gonna go back to the choice board for just a second. All right, so at the bottom of the choice board, I said you can either do 2 iReady reading lessons for this week, also pass them or they don't count, and then create a PowerPoint or some type of media of your choice, or you can write it down if you don't have internet. Um, Compare, contrast the 2 stories in the independent practice. And those would be The Progress of 50 Years and A Widow's Burden. So you've got to read these 2 stories before you do the independent practice. Whether you do it and send it to me in a screenshot or do it on paper at home or however you decide to send it to me, or you do the actual quiz on Canvas, those will be the 2 things that you're comparing and contrasting. All right, and this video will be up here soon. All righty. Thank you. I hope that y'all all had a great Easter weekend. And I miss you and I love you. Okie doke. Bye.